Hello and welcome back from lunch, I think, to the Rave Tech conference, and I'll be talking to you for the next 25-30 minutes about this topic, managing and motivating teams in a distributed world, and I wanted to share some of my experiences of the last 8 months. When we all shut the doors to the Sage office back in March, many of us in the management team started looking up great examples, models of distributed teams working well. And one of the very popular ones that's been talked about a lot over the last few months is this Mullenwee model of a distributed organisation. He of course founded the WordPress organisation that has thousands of employees working remotely around the world. He came up with this model, the 5 levels of autonomy, with level 5 being nirvana and a place where a distributed team can perform even higher levels than an in-person one. But of course, when we look back at the last 8 months and think about managing our teams and organisations, the challenge hasn't just been about distributed workers. It's been about how we manage and motivate teams in a distributed world that has the added pressures and stresses of a pandemic, issues of structural racism coming to the fore, and of course an uncertainty in our own markets, some of which existed pre-pandemic and have been accelerated, and some of which have been entire sort of new pressures that have emerged as a result of the current situation. And so I thought I'd start by asking, how are you? And if I remember anything from my mental health awareness training last year, I'm going to ask it again. How are you? How are you doing? How's it been the last 8 months? For me, it's looked a little bit like this. I've experienced many of these emotions, but in particular, emotions of sort of exhaustion and stress and needing time out, as well as periods of real adrenaline and focus. And I wanted to sort of share this model that has emerged from some of the developmental psychology literature of different states of stress that you can feel during times of emergency. So human creativity and resilience requires an undulating pace, rhythms of rest and recovery alongside emergency. And these sort of phases, the literature has identified 3 sort of core phases of when we talk about human response to pressure. The first being an emergency phase where you've got high energy, high adrenaline, a sense of shared goals and an urgency that give us focus. This emergency phase can also lead to sort of feelings of uncertainty and panic. Then we have the middle phase where we are in regression. There's a sense of fatigue, nothing really energizing you, a loss of purpose, sense of feeling withdrawn and irritable, and then a recovery phase where we shift from surviving to thriving, reorient, reset our goals and expectations. And so human response to sort of pressure can move between these 3 phases, but I think many of us probably particularly look back at the last 8 months and see ourselves yo-yoing between the emergency and the regression with not a huge amount of time for recovery. It's been a particularly challenging time, I think, for us all and for our teams. So just to introduce myself before I talk a bit more about the response that we've had at Sage. I'm the VP of Product Innovation and Productivity at Sage. This is a photo of a younger version of myself. I'm someone who likes to get stuff done, and in my remit support the publishing businesses at Sage to deliver and continuously improve. This is what my years look like so far. A lot of time on video screen, and today is a brilliant example of that. Many of these photos I'm sure will be familiar with you all. Scenes of children and cats and fun backgrounds through Microsoft Teams and experiencing people's living spaces and home spaces alongside their new work environments. Photo of my son Stanley there in the middle when he took over my office chair and brought his own laptop into the fray. He has many meetings and does many emails nowadays. And throughout this, as a manager, the key balance we've been looking to strive is this one of productivity with mental health and well-being. How do we maintain both of these when we're managing our teams? and we're working in an agile environment, how do we manage and maintain levels of productivity when teams are under huge amounts of pressure and we may have sort of high levels of absence, and how do we continue to support the mental health and well-being of our teams in these particularly challenging times? Been a dynamic that we're going talking round and working through. I'm a big fan of retros, and in preparation for the talk did a retro with my team that you can, I'm sure you can probably pause the video if you want to look at any of these faux post-its in a bit more detail, but we looked back and discussed what's been working, what hasn't, and what really needs improvement. And it's out of that retro that I've pulled out these themes that I wanted to share with you. So when we think about managing and motivating teams, I think there's been four critical things that I wanted to pull out and identify in response to the challenge of how we support and drive productivity, how we support and mental health and awareness. These are the four things that I think have been key and that I wanted to share. So the first being around compassionate resilience, the second the next three being more in response to driving that productivity and lassoing the motivations of individuals. So empowering sort of our teams to come together and think about how they work differently, what we can do as an organisation to pursue our mission and support communities during these difficult times, and what new opportunities emerge for innovations and product innovations to support new or accelerated problems that we see amongst our users, our students, researchers and library customers. So the first, compassionate resilience. So this phrase came from a wonky article written by Kate Tapper. She was writing about the reality of that resilience right now needs to be grounded in the reality that we're all having a really hard time. And this is about supporting individual needs first, looking out for and supporting the people in our organisations, the people in our teams or departments who are going through real difficulty. There's been a huge range of pressures on everyday lives, of course, over the last 8 months. The impact of COVID on mental health, anxiety, human connections and relationships. The impact of COVID of what would normally be tragedies that are made worse or even more difficult to deal with, whether it's as a result of the pandemic and the restrictions to human contact around us, whether it's a staff member whose mum was dying of cancer and has had to go to hospice, who she can't see due to lockdown. Unwell family members who can't be supported in the same way, or friends, and with individuals in your teams who have support networks sort of disintegrating around them. Also the impact of civil unrest in the wakes of the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the huge impact on team members, particularly black team members. And so the pressure's been huge of the events happening around us, and I think in response to that pressure, a real strong demand for managers to exercise empathy, to be compassionate and really support individuals get through this time, being open to trusting them and giving them the time they need out, away, the breaks they need to be able to manage through the trauma really of many of the events happening. So I think compassionate resilience, this is about asking people how they really are, spending the time to really have those deep conversations, those one-to-ones with members of your team, encouraging people to take a break, asking them to balance their work and their life to ensure that they're finding new patterns, new routines to break, stretch, exercise, support their physical and mental well-being as well as their work, as that commute has disappeared, that transition time, and everything can bleed and blur much more easily. Incredibly important to look after, for everyone to look after their own mental health, and for us as managers to support that and create the time to ensure that they're doing that, to support that sort of their resilience. I think one of the things around this is also about putting action where our words are, and so not only saying that we'll rebalance workloads, that time can be taken out, but actually rebalancing, reprioritising, removing work if that is necessary for a team to be able to manage through a time when many members may be off or away or working at lower capacity than usual. So getting feedback back from teams on how well we're doing, I think, is something we need to continue to do. We conducted a staff survey in the summer to ask people how they were doing, how they felt they were performing, and the level of support they had from Sage during the early stages of the pandemic. And it's a survey we now need to sort of play again as we've gone through sort of a longer period now of us all being remote, going through a second wave, and personal experiences building up greater sense of isolation. The results from the summer survey were very positive in terms of the support that people felt that they had. There's a lot that's come out from staff around remote working that is actually, that isn't all bad. There's been value that's been created through the flexible work environments, the ease that creates for sort of childcare. 50% of our staff said they've been more productive working from home than they were in the office, and 33% feeling that they're more or less the same. We had 41% of our team saying that they felt less stressed than usual, but 23% feeling that they were more stressed, and so sort of a wide, sort of big, broad range under that level of, under the categories of questions asking around stress and anxiety. When it came to how well we were communicating, we got very positive support about our the communications and support. Staff felt that they had 83% of employees rating the communication from the leadership as very good to good, and 94% saying the support from Sage was good or very good. And I think those early stages of the pandemic and the transition to remote working were done pretty well, and we had fairly positive response rate. I think we sort of got ourselves a bit of a head start through some of the work that we've been doing back in 2019 to move to agile workspace and much more flexible working schedule. Here are some photos from now empty office, but we removed everyone's desks, created different styles of workspace, gave everyone a laptop, and through that sort of change management process also increased the level of trust that we place between staff, employees and their managers to really focus on employee work, on outcomes rather than outputs. And that work that was done through 2019 and early 2020, I think, put us in really good stead, not only to be able to technically get people off-site very quickly with their laptops, with good systems that are all sort of cloud-based and running very easily, but also in that employer relationship, or the staff and management relationship that allowed people to manage their time, work flexibly, and still maintain the same levels of productivity as an organisation as a whole that we were managing pre-pandemic. But I think, like I say, the key will be checking in on that, continuing to check in beyond sort of anecdotal or team-based feedback on how the organisation is feeling now we're much further in, many more months, and I hope that the feedback will be positive, that staff still feel they have high levels of support, but it's a critical part, I think, of being able to manage and motivate teams at this time, giving them the space to handle these very difficult times. When it comes to sort of motivating staff, I think one of the things that has been empowering is working with my team on how we reinvent work. What do we do differently? How do we operate anew? We had much experience of working globally using online tools pre-pandemic, but now we're all remote, and we still need to create a level of innovation, energy, creativity and fun, despite not sitting, in the same room or being able to use post-its on the wall. And it has been good fun, trying new things, exploring and experimenting. We've got some, I wanted to share sort of some tips and tricks from the team on reinventing meetings, that I think many of which are now at higher levels are better than they were in person. Now we've encouraged a lot more sort of both asynchronous communication and collaboration outside the meeting, and more interactivity and tools within the meeting to make sure everyone participates at once. Having everyone remote for global meetings actually can democratise the meeting, rather than having a cluster of people in one office location and the odd people dialing in feeling like the sort of outer circle. With everyone remote, everyone in their box on a screen, everyone able to participate in the chat, actually we get much greater collaboration, participation and positive feedback from teams about the meetings that they're in. We've really used sort of lightning talks very effectively, I think, to keep presentations down to 5-minute max and not allow long presentations in a number of the meetings that in all of the meetings we do. So lightning talk presentations and focus the time on the discussion, a bit like a flipped classroom. We've got we use heavy use of sort of breakouts for smaller group discussion, heavy use of chat, which can be really positive, affirming, supportive, as well as allowing us to sort of raise good questions to influence the chair alongside the meeting, the core sort of meeting discussion, and then lots of interaction using things like Menti polls for bigger group meetings, and some fun with the backgrounds as well. We've got a bit of Halloween going on here on the left. There have been a number of great tools that some of which we dabbled in a bit pre-pandemic, but that have become really critical parts of our workflow. And in case you're not familiar with some of these, I thought I'd share. Idea boards has just been a terrific tool for being able to do big group idea brainstorming and upvoting. It's a free tool that is really ugly, really rudimentary and basic, but does a great job of what it does. Very simple to use, a simple sort of, so you can do a very quick retro or idea sort of ideation session, allowing any number of people to post ideas on the boards and then upvote, and so it's great for facilitation of sort of very big groups. Microsoft Whiteboards has been an excellent tool for doing process mapping. We've got a lot of lean work to really try and make our processes much more efficient at the moment. Miro has been an excellent tool for user journey mapping. Mentimeter, I mentioned, has been terrific for being able to get collaboration, feedback, polling, interactivity into some of the larger meetings that we handle. And then on the top left, we've got our coffee connector application, which was built in-house as a way to simulate that coffee, water cooler or coffee making tea point, serendipitous conversation between two people. Anyone can sign up to Coffee Connector now and get matched with someone else anywhere in the organisation, and then set up a half-hour cup of coffee with that person just for a bit of a serendipitous chat. Actually, one of the things that I particularly enjoyed hearing from the feedback in the retro we did in our group was actually the sort of right to moan, the need to moan that was missing. And so things like Coffee Connector or being able to add 10 minutes to the beginning of your catch-up has been a great way to encourage those moans. The other thing we've done actually is really simple, but for meetings, make them all 25 or 55 minutes long rather than the 30 and 60 minutes. So you have 5 minutes between each meeting to have a bit of a stretch, a loo break, a coffee, get yourself a coffee, but being able to actually move a bit and not be sedentary in one place has been a really valuable sort of gain from that. Some of our sort of communication, cultural alignment work on new sort of cultural initiatives has been really fun and much stronger than it had ever previously been. We now have a sort of fortnightly video from Blaise Simcu, our CEO, talking about state of play in the business, priorities, changes, restructures, all coming from one point. It's been able to really line up communication. He's done this sort of videos in and around his house at local places, so we get a dose of California sunshine every fortnight, which has been, well, it was fun at the beginning when it was summer. It's less fun now when we're all sitting in the gloom, but there you go, he does them very well. And on the right there, we created a Jeopardy style game for one of our sort of lean training sessions that was really fun, interactive, engaging, and I think just sort of taking that training to a higher level was really terrific. One of the other things that I think's been terrific to see is sort of organisations like the Big House, which is a charity working with young people who are referred from social care services and working with them to put on theatre productions, and now developing packages for businesses. So you can pay for a theatre experience from them to put on an extract from one of their performances. This one was called Bullet Tongue, is about County Lines drug dealing, and you have the excerpt and then a Q&A with the actors. And it's been a terrific way of supporting our D&I programme, but also building empathy skills and awareness amongst all members of our team, particularly important, of course, for managers, and particularly important for managers at this time. The third area I wanted to talk about was about how we've sort of motivated teams, or harnessed the sort of motivation of our teams through sort of discussions about how we can support communities, policymakers, sort of academics who at this time are needing to understand some new things about the world around us and look at ways to tackle them. So how do we fulfill our mission that has been grounded in social science research since we were founded in 1965 to support the world at this time? And there have been a number of ideas that have emerged and put into execution by teams that are really impressive and inspiring to open up our resources and make them more available. We've got a microsite here in the top left-hand corner for information and resources on structural racism and police violence, huge area of our publishing programme. Through Social Science Space, we look at how social science research social scientists' response to the pandemic and research that is happening at the moment. We've got, like many publishers, opened up our research content that is in support of COVID research. And also we have a Sage Ocean, a big data and social science Sage Ocean, a programme that's looking to support social scientists working with big data, microsites, spotlighting like big data resources that social scientists can work with openly to explore and tackle some of the thorny topics that are emerging for us in society, to understand and chart paths and forward. The fourth area I wanted to talk about was about how we sort of worked with our teams to identify some new problems emerging for our customers, for our users, students and researchers, and solve those problems through products and through whether that's features or product innovation. Churchill, I think, said, "Never let a crisis go to waste," and that's been a rallying cry to really sort of create some high energy sessions amongst our teams. One of the exciting acquisitions we made a couple of years ago was of Lean Library, and that product has never been more important than it is today. A product that streamlines access to research and teaching resources for remote researchers, and in response to the demand at the early stages of the pandemic for libraries looking to solve that problem as everybody went off campus, the team at Lean Library did some really terrific things to streamline the onboarding process for Lean Library, something that could take a couple of months to get new customers set up with all of the appropriate feeds and APIs into library systems. Now 80% of the setup can be done in just 2 days. And so it's exciting to see how the team can respond to make sure we could get our products out as fast and as well as possible to support the problems, new or accelerated problems that our customers were seeing. We've also been looking to evolve our online pedagogy offerings, our digital resources for online teaching, with some really exciting new and expanded offerings through Sage Vantage, Sage Campus, and Sage Catalyst, which is powered by Talis Elevate, that are all digital solutions bringing our textbook content, delivering our textbook content in new ways for teaching faculty to use to work with students who are remote. So what else? The 4 things. I guess the 5th thing links back to that concept of compassionate resilience I talked about at the beginning. But I think it's the sort of, this isn't a solution so much as a problem that I thought maybe you could help out with. This is me about 12 months ago at the Sage Christmas party, and only one drink in, but very happily singing along to the band at that point in the evening. And the thing that I've really struggled with is that sort of loss of fun, energy and creative interaction that you get only when people are in the same space. That there are all sorts of ways that you can creatively use the remote space, that you can support people, but actually my own needs have been very much around like that human interaction, those signals, those social collaborations that you get, and to support my own resilience through this time. How to have fun in this world that's remote. Wouldn't it be nice if we could all have a drink tonight and have a chat, and you could give me some tips and we could have a laugh about it? But without that possibility, I thought maybe you could give me some tips through the chat. What have you done to look after yourselves, to keep your energy flowing every day, even as you go into to get yourself out of that sort of regression phase of those three traffic light blocks of human response to pressure, and into the rest and respite. That's the question I thought I would leave you with today, but I think I'm available right now on chat for any other questions that you might have. How do we manage and motivate teams? It has been incredibly hard during this time, and certainly huge lessons learned from things that have worked and not worked so well. And I hope I was able to share some useful ones with you today, but I would love to hear more about what your experience has been and what else I could learn from and we could share with each other as a community. Thank you. Bye.